Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me once again. We are continuing our reading of the Word of God. We are getting started in the first book of Samuel. So introductions are necessary. Background introduction through the two books of Samuel, because there's 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, are named for the key figure of the early chapters. Samuel could not have written more than part of 1 Samuel, since his death is recorded in chapter 25. That he did, in fact, write a book is attested to in 1 Samuel in chapter 10, verse 25. 1 Chronicles 29, verse 29, or chapter 29, verse 29, indicates that Nathan and Gad also wrote about the events recorded in Samuel. You know, and just with a side note on this, and a lot of people get finicky about who wrote the Bible and when which parts were these people written, and how can you call it 1 Samuel when Samuel didn't even write all the books, and see, it's making the Bible a liar. Personally and honestly, I think God can work through anybody who he decides to have written down based off of these things, just like with the book of like Genesis, Exodus, and things of that nature were written by Moses, but weren't written till years afterwards. You know, it's just because obviously Moses wasn't around for Genesis. So how would he be able to interpret anything that had happened before he was even brought to this earth? You know, so you take in that comparison and you understand that God's sovereignty and his ability to do the impossible, and giving this knowledge, this visual information to people to write out this book for what God wants us to understand and know, is really not that far of a leap. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. I don't see any problem with having multiple writers. Even if the authors aren't understood and known, I don't see a problem with that. It's all derived from the Holy Spirit and what God wants written in his word. The word was there before the word was there. You know what I mean? For the written word was there, the word was there. So yeah, and also at that time, you know, a lot of these people, they didn't have Bibles. You know, they had scripts and stuff that was written down. But anyways, I'm going side here. So with a little bit of the historical background, Samuel emerged as the last judge in the 350-year span of the judges. The book covers a period of about 115 years, from the childhood of Samuel to the beginnings of the reign of King David, appearing on the scene during one of the darkest periods of Israel's history. Samuel called the people to a revival of the true worship of Yahweh, and he was also a kingmaker, anointing both Saul and David. Thus, 1 Samuel forms the link between the judges and the monarchy. Its contents. So 1 Samuel focuses on 3 principal characters: Samuel, Saul, and David. 2 Samuel centers exclusively on David. The principal lesson of the book has to do with the effects of sin and holiness in relation to the people and their leaders. Well-known stories in the book include that of David and Goliath, David and Jonathan, and Saul and the witch of Endor. Just as a small outline of what we'll be going through here in the 1 Samuel book. So Samuel's obviously the last judge. We'll be going over his early life and call, his ministry, and his war with the Philistines. The capture of the ark by the Philistines, the defeat of Israel, the curse on the ark on the Philistines, and then the return of the ark by the Philistines. His revival ministry to Israel, his warning to Israel concerning their demand for a king. And then you have Saul, the first king, and then the rise of Saul, the reminder of Samuel, the rejection of Saul, the replacement of Saul by David. And these are all just going through the entire book. I'm just giving you a small outline. The rise of David over Saul, the rejection of David by Saul, And obviously there's a numerous amount of other things that go in between each of these. I'm just not going that far in depth because we'll obviously get there. Let's see here. The refuge of David in Philistine territory. David becomes a Philistine servant, ending with the Philistines and the death of Saul. That is the primary outline of what we'll be reading through out the next 30 odd so chapters. Exactly 31 chapters. So, and here's a little timeline for you. So you see here in 1375 BC, over here, is when Israel was starting to be ruled by judges. Then we can see over here that around in the early thousands, about 1080, Saul was born, coming all over the timeline. Here's when David becomes king over all of Israel, and then going forward. So you have that 400 year span afterwards as well, because Solomon, the son of David, is born in 991 BC. But that's continuing and going further beforehand. Let's see here. Yeah, that seems like a pretty good outline undergoing of what we'll be getting into over the next couple of weeks while we're reading through 1 Samuel. Yeah, so it'd probably take us about, if we are capable of doing 3 chapters a day, we'll have it in about 10 videos. So, like I said, a couple weeks. Obviously, life can throw some curveballs in there, as we all know, but we'll get it all done nonetheless. Just picking up flower petals that have fallen from over here. Okay. All right. So, first book of Samuel, chapter 1. Silly little tabs taking space. So this was my first Bible that I got, and the tabs that were added in, my wife added in, but they didn't have a placement marker, I don't think, when she did it. And so, bless her heart, they're a little off throughout, but it works, And then when I got my Ryrie Study Bible, I bought some of these. I can't even remember the name of them now. Jeez. But it came with a placement marker. And so, just to get an example here, and I got a lot of sticky notes, but you see how bunched up they are together with all the tabs. There we go, the tabs. It's wonderful. And then you have my King James Ryrie one that I did. And they're all perfectly unilateral. It's just funny. It just cracks me up. Because when I get to these things, then I have to figure out these words that are covered up a little bit. That's alright. I'm just giving my wife a hard time. She's sleeping behind me over here. I don't know if you can see her. Got stuff on the couch. Look right there. Yeah, she fell asleep. Alright, 1 Samuel, chapter 1, the birth of Samuel. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophaim, of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, and Ephrathite. He had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Yeah, I'm going to say Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts of Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Phinehas his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously, to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep, and why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant, and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Very similar. This is it is Jebusite, isn't it? No. What is the word? We just got done reading this in Judges with Samson. Oh my goodness. How can I not remember what the name is? Sorry, I'm looking for the name and it's going to drive me insane until I do. Nazarite. There we go. So it sounds very similar to a Nazarite. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. I'm sorry, the cat's trying to get out of the bathroom. Give me 1 second. The scratching is going to drive me crazy. Apologies. She just shut the door until you let her out. Let's see here. Where was I? So it was halfway through 13. So Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. They arose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord when they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. So just little keynotes here. First one, Ramathaim Zophim, the heights of Zephite, a long name for Ramah, a city in the hill country of Ephraim, 5 miles north of Jerusalem. Although Elkanah was an Ephraimite by residence, he was a Levite by birth, though the Kohathites, who were allotted towns in Ephraim. From verse 2, though the variance with God's ideal for marriage, polygamy, which is multiple wives, or polyamory is multiple husbands, was allowed in the case of a childless first marriage. and a Levite marriage, and of a Levirate marriage, but the practice often caused great misery. So verse 3, yearly, 3 times a year, male Israelites were required to appear at the central sanctuary at the festivals of unleavened bread, Pentecost, and the tabernacles. And those are the same 3 events or festivals that you would see. Jesus would be the only reason why he would actually go into Jerusalem was to attend these 3. Other than that, Jesus was primarily outside of Jerusalem. He was his ministry more towards the areas in the north. But yeah, he didn't spend a lot of time in Jerusalem, except to observe these festivals, as was expected by men, by the law. Again, fulfillment of the law, not to take away from it, but to fulfill it, because nobody from the point of creation was able to fulfill the law. Jesus Christ is the only one that's been able to fulfill the law. That's why he is. That's also the perfect sacrifice, because of his perfection. He is the only perfect thing. Let's see here. And its note which festivals this was is not said, Lord of hosts, a military figure referring to God as the one who commands the angelic armies of heaven and the armies of Israel. The term emphasizes the sovereignty and omnipotence of God, the location of the tabernacle, and the religious center of the nation until the loss of the ark. It was 20 miles north of Jerusalem. Let's see here. So adversary, you see the wives were adversarial against each other, which is also probably another form of the misery. Elkanah considered his love and care for her a greater blessing than a large family. You can see this in verse 8 when he says, well, aren't I better than 10 sons given to you, or aren't I worth what it is exactly to say? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Let's see here. We stopped at verse 20. So verse 11, Hannah vowed that if she was given a son, he would be dedicated to lifelong Levitical services and becoming a long-lived Nazirite. From verse 13, apparently drunkenness was not uncommon even at the tabernacle and by women. From verse 15, the outpouring of one's soul before God is an excellent description of fervent prayer. Verse 16, a daughter of Belial equals a worthless woman. Verse 16. Oh, do not regard your servant as a worthless woman. Whereas in the King James, verse 16, it actually says, count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Let's see here. 19, knew. Okay, so when he said that he knew her, often as here the euphemism for sexual relations. And Samuel means name of God and serves as a continual reminder of God's mercy toward those who call upon his name. We are barely going to get through chapter 1, it seems like. What time is it? I got time. Verse 21. Samuel given to the Lord. The man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah, a flour, a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, "O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who is standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord." And he is worshipped. And he worshipped the Lord there. Some keynotes. Weaned. Hebrew children were normally weaned at 2 to 3 years from breastfeeding. 123, gave her son suck, nursed. Let's see, we know what an epa is. Verse 28, lent him. Literary made him over. The idea is that out of a complete and irrevocable giving up of the child to the Lord, Hannah was careful to pay the vow even at great cost. All right. So now we go to chapter 2, which is going to be partially Hannah's prayer, Eli's worthless sons, and the Lord rejects Eli's household. Eli rebukes the sons, and then the Lord rejects Eli's household. So we'll get into that here. Hopefully we should be able to get to chapter 4, finish 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1 wasn't even long. I'm just explaining a lot, I guess. Oh. All right, chapter 2, Hannah's prayer. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, or the bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and rises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by my might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest. So let's just recap over here with this. So verses 1 through 10, Hannah's praises in response to God's answer to her prayer, and was probably delivered before the congregation of worshipers. The theme of Hannah's praise is to her confidence in God's sovereignty. Hannah praises God for his holiness, knowledge, power, and judgment. From verse 1, an image of invincible strength. Hannah was delivered from disgrace to strength and honor. From verse 5, God often reverses human circumstances, humbling the proud and exalting the humble. You can see more on that on Proverbs chapter 16 and chapter 18. So in verse 6, Sheol, the place of the dead awaiting the resurrection and the great white throne judgment, equivalent to Hades in the New Testament. Let's see here. We did not get to that, so we're there. Okay. So chapter 2, verses 12, Eli's worthless sons. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. The custom of the priests with the people was that when they were, I'm getting all tongue-tied. The custom of the priests with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into a pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up to the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servants would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let them burn the fat first, and then take as much as you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now, and if not, I will take it by force." Thus the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the men treated the offspring of the Lord with contempt. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod, and his mother used to make for him a little robe and would take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord." So then they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. So let's see here, recap of verses 12 through 21. Verses 13 through 17. The sons of Eli were guilty of taking more of the sacrifice than in their allotted portion, of taking the meat before the fat had been burned as a sacrifice to God, and of generally despising the offerings of the Lord. Let's see here from verse 18. An ephod, a close-fitting, sleeveless apron-like garment, extending to the hips, and worn almost exclusively by the priest, used when officiating before the altar. Let's see, verse 20, children for the loan which is lent better in place of the one dedicated. 21, Hannah provides an example for fervent prayer, obedience, worship, and a devotion to family that resulted in God's blessing. So continuing on in verse 22, Eli rebukes his sons. Now Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him?" I mean, at this point in time, yeah, obviously, Jesus hadn't come yet, but just look at that question and ask yourself. Just saying. And in case you don't understand or you don't know, Jesus Christ intercedes to God for us on behalf of the sins that we've made, because we can't atone for them. God does not like sacrifice continually over and over and over and over and over again, just to repeat the same sins over and over and over and over and over again. Thus, Jesus intercedes for us in all the things that we do, while the accuser sits there telling God of everything you do wrong. Every tiny little thing. Satan, the deceiver, is up in heaven. He still has access to heaven. I hope you people understand this. He is not kicked out of heaven completely yet. That does not happen until the last portion of the tribulation, before or right after the rapture. During the tribulation time is when Lucifer finally gets booted out permanently. Does not get back in there. After the war, Michael casts him out. There's a war in heaven. If you want to read more about it, is in the book of Revelations. Anyways, the deceiver sits there day and night telling God every tiny little itty bitty thing that you do wrong. Obviously, God knows this. He is not unfamiliar with this. He knows, but the deceiver is still sitting there. The accuser is sitting there telling God, "Well, look what they did. Look what they did here. This is so bad here. This is what they're breaking your laws here. See, they're just horrible, horrible things. Why do you let them stay?" And then there's Jesus going, "It's okay. I paid for that." So, anyways, continuing. But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. Now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and also with man. So just a little quick revert of 22 through 26. Women that assembled, not as priests, but by helping in some way. That verse 25, better see, because the Lord, the preposition may denote the result. Therefore, the Lord, not the severe consequences of this sinning against God. Yeah, there's not really too much on the keynotes with that specific set. I think it's pretty cut and dry, pretty easy to understand. Okay, so continuing with verse 27. 4:41. Oh, goodness. We're ahead of time. 30 minutes already? Okay. Verse 27. The Lord rejects Eli's household. And there came a man of God to Eli and said to him, Thus says the Lord, do I indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, subject to the house of Pharaoh? Did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? I gave to the house of your father all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Why then do you scorn my sacrifices and my offerings that I command for my dwelling? And you honor your sons above me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people, Israel. Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promise that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. Then in distress you will look with envious eye on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed on Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared to weep his eyes out, to grieve his heart. And all the descendants of your house shall die by the sword of men. And this that shall come upon your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you both. Both of them shall die on the same day. And I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build to him a sure house, and he shall go in and out before my anointed forever. And everyone who is left in your house shall come to implore him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and shall say, Please put me in one of the priest places, that I may eat a morsel of bread. So that is the end of chapter 2 here. Just a little revert. The prophet predicts the destruction of the priest family of Eli, partially fulfilled in the massacre of the priests of Nob, and in the transfer of the priesthood to the family of Zadok in the time of Solomon. The death of Eli's two sons on the same day would be a sign to validate the prophecy. And that's pretty much all that I wrote about that section of it. All right, let's see here. We have 21 verses for chapter 3. I think we can get this done. I think we got it. All right. Chapter 3, the Lord calls Samuel. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, Here I am, and ran to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call. Lie down again. So he went and lay down. And the Lord had called again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, my son. Lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, for your servant hears. Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the 2 ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. Samuel lay until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he said, Here I am. And Eli said, What was it that was told to you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he told you. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. All right, success. We got all 3 chapters done. Go down here and let's see. His first visits. Yeah, there's not really any keynotes that I don't think wasn't pretty self-explanatory throughout that chapter. Excuse me. It's pretty cut and dry, I think. God had been quiet for quite a while. Eli got to a point where he was old and couldn't see anymore. God was calling out to Samuel, and Samuel, hearing the voice of God, thinking that it was his father, kept going over, which it is, but going over and, here I am. And then Eli understanding, God's trying to talk to him, but he doesn't necessarily know this. So let's tell him. And so that's where that connection comes through. This is the first prophecy given to Samuel from the Lord. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Chapter 4 is going to be the Philistines capturing the ark. So we're going to take a dramatic turn here, I believe, in the next chapter for the face of Israel. But it's all right. Dude, thank you, though, very much for joining me. It has been a nice, long video. I don't think I've made a video this long in quite some time. But I do thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I hope that you enjoyed the reading and learning together. Something that you may not know, do know. I don't know if I've gone over this. Like, I've been read to the Bible audio-wise. But doing this, what we've been doing in the video recordings, is the first time that I personally would have visually read myself the Bible in its entirety. So we're all going through this. I'm going through this with you guys for my first time. So I think it's a great thing. I've heard the entirety of the Bible, obviously, but when you're listening audioly and you're not just constantly in it, you miss a lot of things. So I'll be reading it for the rest of my life over and over and over again. However many times that I'll be able to do that. But just wanted a little fun fact for you. So I will be letting you go. I gotta get ready to leave and get ready for work. Hope you all have a blessed day. God bless you. I love you all. And I will see you next time.